Well, good morning, good afternoon, and or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. For you coming back, thanks for coming back to our programming. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and over the last few years, I have had a distinct pleasure of hosting a series of live webcast conversations, especially designed for Canadian tech leadership audiences. In this program, we are bringing Canadian tech executives to share their stories. We're also bringing in the topics that we believe are relevant, important, topical on the matters of IT and technology, but also tech leadership. And today I have a really distinct pleasure and privilege to host a guest that is going to talk to us about what I believe is a very, very critical aspect of the overall executive and leadership presence of a tech leader. Something that I think is going to be very useful and usable to anyone who is listening to this conversation, but will be particularly useful for technology leaders who are now presented with a career moment, a career opportunity. And that is the opportunity to actually step up and become and be seen and experienced as a true enterprise leader, as well as tech executive, right? So this is a very, very interesting moment in history, and moment in our industry where this expectation is with us now. And the task at hand is, how does this technology executive elevate themselves to actually rightfully keep that seat at the top table? This is a live conversation, so that means that you are able to submit questions to Marina and myself. So please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A function of this Zoom platform. And with that, I would actually love to welcome my special guest, Marina. Marina Byezhanova is the founder of Brand of a Leader, which is a specialized consultancy that focuses on helping both academia and professionals, business leaders, think about, design, adopt, navigate their personal and leadership brand. So today we're going to talk about the importance of branding. Marina, I would not do you justice in introducing you properly, other than to say that you are an expert in this domain. I typically ask all of my guests to introduce themselves, tell us their stories. So maybe, Marina, we start there. And what sort of took you, what is the journey that took you to be the expert in branding? And what we want to do for the remainder of the session today is to understand, first of all, why is personal branding important? To discuss what it actually is. And then I would love for you to share your experience on how to actually approach development of a personal brand with some relevant examples to wrap it up.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It is an absolute honor and pleasure from, when we first spoke, I think in the summer of this year, to then our collaboration at the incredible Next Gen CIO Academy at Deloitte. Just the entire team has been an absolute delight and pleasure. Thank you to all of you who have joined to listen and see what personal branding is all about, why it's relevant to you, how you can build a personal brand too. It makes my heart sing. Certainly, I'm extremely passionate about the topic of personal branding for leaders. So we're not talking about, personal branding for influencers that are looking to monetize their, Instagram presence. Oftentimes, people think that that's what personal branding is all about. No, what my agency, Brand of a Leader, does is we focus on building leadership brands. We work with Gen X entrepreneurs, CEOs, and some academics as well, as Dalibor mentioned. I do want this to be interactive. I know that most of us are, zoomed out. So please introduce yourselves if you feel compelled. What's your name? Who are you? Where are you joining from? Anything that you feel like sharing, or perhaps you've been thinking about your leadership brand and you would want to share what your leadership brand actually is. And the hint I will give you before we jump into, dissecting it further is that your brand is about who you are. It's not about what you do. If you know Dalibor, and that's why you're here, you'll know that he brands himself as an optimist. So not, I'm partner at Deloitte, that's what he does, that's very good street cred, but his brand is he's an optimist. So if you know what your brand is, please share it. If you don't, just please your name and where you're joining from. That would be great to know. So let me introduce myself. I won't spend a lot of time on it. If you Google me, the benefit of having a very complicated last name is that not many people have it. Nobody has it in the combination with my first name. So if you Google me, I'm the only one that shows up. So if you want to learn about me and what my credentials are and background, that's all you have to do is just Google or punch it into LinkedIn. Thank you for whoever did the laughing emoji. My last name was the bane of my existence and something I was ashamed of for many years. You see, I was born in what at the time was the Soviet Union. I'm thinking maybe I should stop mentioning that because it almost feels like, does that age me a lot? It does. But I was born in what at the time was the Soviet Union. I was born to a Jewish father, which is why my parents gave me my mom's unpronounceable last name. They didn't want people to know. At the time, wasn't quite safe that I was Jewish. And my family came to Canada when I was a teenager. I was 16 years old. I remember sitting on a flight for the first time ever and seeing clouds underneath my body that was on the flight, and just a complete paradigm shift and feeling my life is never going to be the same. I came to Canada. I remember landing in Canada, coming out onto the Canadian soil, feeling so privileged and excited and thinking, this is democracy. This is the place where I can have a voice. What a weird thing for a 16-year-old to be thinking of, but I did, because I grew up in a culture of censorship, a culture of a lot of whisper, and a culture of you need to say the right thing or, say nothing at all. And as an outspoken child, my motto in life is stand out, speak up, be radically authentic. Outspoken child has struggled. I came to Canada. I felt, well, here I can have a voice. I can speak up. Technically, constitutionally, that was the case. Practically, my English was so terrible that I could speak, but most people didn't have the patience of hearing what I had to say, and so they wouldn't really listen. That was really difficult. School was really difficult for me. I graduated from, the beautiful McGill University. If you're in Canada, for sure, with a business degree. I felt the world is my oyster. I had a very hard time getting a job. And later on, I found out that my last name again and not being from Canada was not playing in my favor. Marketing was quite particular at the time, and local experience and all those things were preferred. And so for me, over the years, I just realized that this whole idea of voice, having a voice, being able to be heard, standing out in a way that didn't make me feel like I'm weird, awkward, or how people would refer to me, interesting. Marina's interesting. It was not meant as a compliment, but I wanted to stand out in a way that felt authentic. I wanted to have a voice, and to me, that became the biggest asset. So my journey of building my personal brand, which I didn't call it that at the time, I called it, I wanted to put myself out there. My journey started with this very deep internal need to be heard and to have a voice, a completely selfish need, not to deliver something of value, to be heard, but just to be able to speak. It started as such. But what I realized over the years was how many leaders were not using their voice. How many leaders who aren't censored, who live in Canada or wherever you're joining from, chances are, it's not Soviet Union politics and vibes. I have the privilege of having and using their voice, but I realized how many leaders self-censor. Either internally wear a mask that, puts them in a box of how they present themselves and how they communicate, or externally have no voice. You Google many leaders who are incredible at what they do. They're talented, they're phenomenal. Nothing to be found. No voice externally outside of their organization. And so I made it my mission to not only find ways of using my voice and standing out, but inspiring leaders to do the same so that they can find their voice, inspire, and impact internally and externally. And thus was born Brand of a Leader, which is our personal branding agency. So that's the introduction. I said it was going to be short. It was
Oh,
a bit
it's
longer.
very good. Provides a great context. It provides a great context. So let's talk about personal and leadership branding. Why does one, I think that you're starting to sort of peel on why does one need it. I'd love to actually also understand what is a personal brand, right? So let's peel the onion a little bit, Marina.
Let's peel the onion. Let's get to the depth of it. I'll quickly address a couple of misconceptions. One is personal branding is not your social media posts. If anybody's sitting here concerned that I'm about to start, jamming Instagram down your throat and telling you that, it's not. So stay with us, stay tuned and continue listening. I'll share a couple of my slides for a moment, just so that I can give a little bit more, clear context. And we're going to start, well, I'll give you very quickly the origins of personal branding first, because, for so many people, it feels like it's a very recent construct. So many people say it's a fad. So many people say, well, I don't need it because I don't know, this is for the younger guys and gals. I don't need this. We work with Gen Xers. The fact is that not only personal branding is as a concept is something that originated many years ago, it's, as Dalibor has said, it's become a reality. We can deny reality in the same way that corporations denied social media 15 years ago, said this is not for us, this is not for our organization, had a list of differences with other organizations and reasons, and here we are. Personal branding is the same. It's an incredible tool that is beneficial in very many ways as we manage our careers. We'll get to those in a moment. Very quickly, introducing to all of you Dr. Tom Peters. Some of you might be familiar with his work. He's a Stanford University professor. He's written a multitude of books on the topics of business excellence and leadership. This is one of his very famous quotes that I know Dalibor likes, that every now and then does the rounds on social media. It's a feel-good one. But what most people don't know is that it was Dr. Tom Peters who in 1997, before, predates social media, wrote an article in Fast Company that was called The Brand Called You. And in that article, he's the one that coins the concept of personal branding. He's the one that's credited with coining it. And he's the one that talked about this whole idea of being CEO of Me, Inc. And a lot in the context of employability and career management, not, creating an Instagram account and monetizing it, which certainly at the time was not something in existence at all. So personal branding as an idea and a concept is something that originated a long time ago. It's just become popularized for many reasons. And of course, social media fueled it. Reality television culture, for better or for worse, it fueled that as well. Decrease in trust that people have in corporate messaging also fueled it. When HR says our organization is the best organization to work for, we kind of tune it out. If Dalibor writes let's say a post on LinkedIn and talks about how proud he is to be representing Deloitte and White, we're going to pay more attention. So the words of human beings, the messaging of human beings is becoming more and more powerful than corporate messaging. And if we think of ourselves, how many corporate messages do we pay attention to, especially if it's not organizations we're affiliated with, versus how many people will listen to on whatever platform. Does not have to be online, can be offline. And so one of the questions that we asked ourselves when we launched Brand of a Leader and started growing, we have clients across the globe in North America, South America, Israel, now Australia, the Middle East. We've grown quite a bit, but we started asking ourselves the question, well, why are people, and when I say why are people, specifically Gen X successful leaders, why are they investing time and resources, sometimes financial resources, but time, in figuring out what their personal brands are and then building them, marketing them, putting themselves out there? Why are they doing it? So many people say, well, I don't need it. Well, why do they need it? We conducted a survey. We interviewed Gen X leaders, and 3 main reasons surfaced. And it will be one of the things for you to reflect on what resonates with you the most. Those 3 main reasons were visibility, portability, and a platform. visibility, portability, and a platform. And we can dissect those into, what they really mean. So certainly when you have a personal brand, we'll talk about what is a personal brand in a moment. But when you have a personal brand, when that gives you recognizability of your name and understanding of what it is that you stand for, who you are, not just what you do, you're able to expand that visibility. What it gives to you is it allows you to attract opportunity. You become a magnet, in a sense, to opportunity. And we've all seen that in our own organizations, in our own businesses. It's not always the most qualified person that gets the best opportunities, but it is the one with the most visibility. We can hate it, despise it, protest it, talk about how that's not fair. But in reality, visibility for so many people is a game changer. And that visibility, what that visibility gives you will be highly dependent on your goals. How you manage your visibility, what your strategy is going to be for it, depends on your individual goals. We have some leaders that will come to us depending on the focus of their organization. They want to be able to support the marketing function. For many tech leaders, most tech leaders, they want to be able to support hiring. Because we all know that hiring in general has not been easy for quite a few years.
Yeah.
But in tech, the war for talent is severe.
Yeah.
Very hard.
And on top of hiring, which is sort of visibility externally, I think that there is also a very important opportunity to increase tech executives' visibility within the organization. That actually is, to me, even more, well, probably as critical, maybe not even more, but as critical. And this is the moment, as I mentioned in the opening, now is a time for tech leaders to show up, step up, be visible, and engage with their peers and their clients as at that sort of same level, which I think where visibility would help, right?
Hugely. And so when I'm talking about supporting the HR function, the key aspect is to be able to attract top A talent to your own team.
Right.
That is the key, because as people are looking at different organizations, they're evaluating the leaders that they're going to be working for. We know that within every organization and culture, and a company can have an amazing culture, but it's a whole lot of subcultures that are dependent on the individual leader. We know that statistics shows that almost 80% of people don't quit the company. They quit their boss.
Yeah.
And so more and more job seekers are now starting to evaluate the potential boss that they're going to have. And so when they know what their potential boss stands for, who they are, they seem like an inspired individual, they have visibility, they have higher chances, you have higher chances of attracting better talent to your team. Certainly internally as well, you have better chances of, and there was a study that came out, I should pull it out, next time we meet, I'll have it handy, Dalbor, but there was a study that was conducted during COVID, and they showed that people, employees, leaders with stronger brands or stronger personal leadership brands had much higher, not only does it impact employability, but they had a lot more a whole more opportunity of retaining their roles within their companies, but not only their existing roles, but with internal mobility. Because often, things happen and departments have to get restructured. But if you have visibility within the organization, not just with your direct boss, but within the organization, there's a lot more opportunity for internal mobility as well. So supports that quite a bit. Number two, portability. Portability is an important one, and that connects to that portability within different, so externally as well. I mean, things happen, we get laid off, right? Things happen. It's hard when you have to rely on your CV and send it out and hope that that tells your story.
100%. As a matter of fact, that is also very important for tech leaders. We know that in the technology domain, the whole domain, the half-life of both tech leader at the top and the tech skill is relatively short, right? It's short. So people are often in position to be actively looking for their next opportunity as well, right? And it's really bad time to start your network and start your brand once you're out there looking, right?
Well, because building your brand or your visibility, it's not an event, it's a process.
Bingo, exactly.
Right. So when you start with, it's same as networking, right? When people start networking, when they're looking for a job, well, it's no longer networking. You're really proactive looking for a job when you do it before. And if you invest in it before, it pays dividends throughout, and especially when you need it.
Correct.
I love one of the questions in chat about personality type, introvert versus extrovert, how that plays into the branding process. And I will absolutely get to it. That's a very important one. And I can tell you that because a lot of people think that personal branding is for extroverts. And vast majority of our clients at Brand of a Leader are introverts.
Mm-hmm.
And I have good news there that's gonna come to you on that in that regard. So please stay tuned. So portability is important, portability again, but not only externally, because you might be an absolute superstar within your organization, your role is completely secure, you're not looking for any external portability, but your visibility that leads to portability might give you other opportunities. You might want to have, board seats. You might have to, have other, engagements that are meaningful as part of the visibility you're building, and certainly not to underestimate the portability it gives you within the organization as well. And then finally, the underestimated one, but a very important one, is the platform. And it's really interesting because when I talk about the idea of having a platform, that's where I lose a lot of people. They tune out because they say, oh, what do I need a platform for? Even just the whole idea of I'm building my brand sounds so like narcissistic and uncomfortable, right? Like icky. So often we reframe it. We say it's about you putting yourself out there. It's about more people knowing who you are. The saying is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. With personal branding, it's who knows you. You're able to expand that visibility. So you expand how many people know you. So if the term is making you feel all kinds of uncomfortable, we rephrase it and we call it, I'm putting myself out there and making myself more known and more recognized for not only what I do, but who I am as well. The platform, though, I want to mention to you because it's a very important one. When you think of putting yourself out there with the aim of inspiring and impacting people, it really shifts the paradigm from I'm building my visibility, my personal brand, I'm putting myself out there for me, to, but maybe I can impact, inspire, and do something bigger than me. It gives longevity to you putting yourself out there. You become a lot more compelling because when people see that you show up to talk about something else besides what you do, it becomes inspiring and compelling to people. And when you're able to do that scale, well, certainly you're able to impact a lot more people. Mm-hmm. So now you asked me another question, Dalibor, too. You asked me, well, what is personal branding? What is a personal brand? So let's talk about that too. So a personal brand, so really, if you think about, the end, KPI and measurement of personal branding, it's the recognizability of our names and people knowing what we stand for. It's an expression of who we are and not what we do. I've said it 2 or 3 times, and I'm going to keep repeating it. Because if it's the only thing you remember from everything I say today, it is that. Your personal brand is an expression of who you are and not what you do. And that's very important. It's your ability to communicate to people and convey to people that you're not just your title, you're just your vocation. If you lose your job, then you are nobody because now you don't have a title. Your personal brand expresses who you are. And it's also something that not only gives it longevity, but it gives it portability as well. Because what we do, we pivot throughout our life, but who we are stays essentially the same.
This is, I think, very important also to just mention what you just said now, that the quality of who you are is actually a persistent quality. It's obvious when you say it, but it's important because it talks about the importance of getting your brand right, because your brand actually, I think also, if it's to be authentic, if it's to be true, authentic, has to reflect who you are, which is, I think, that persistent quality that you should have forever, right? I assume rarely changes. Rarely changes in any radical fashion, right?
You are so correct. And that is a point that is so important and so misunderstood. A lot of people feel that building their personal brand is rooted in something fake. I researched something, I came up with something, and that's going to be it. Wrong. The opposite of that. When you build your personal brand, when you first uncover, well, what is your brand? Because before you start marketing it and building it, well, what is it? It's a deep and sometimes painful process of introspection. When our clients come to us, our prospective clients, and when people say, okay, I'm going to do it. Okay, yes, convinced, I'm going to work on my personal brand. They come to us, and when people say, I'm ready, what they mean is they're ready for execution. I am ready. What are we doing? Marina, what are we doing? Are we going to be doing LinkedIn? Am I going to be doing speaking engagements? What are we doing? And then I tell them that as part of our process, we go through 2 to 3 months of deep introspection to figure out, well, but who are you? What is it that we're going to be branding? What is it that's going to be that positioning? A lot of people feel very discouraged because they're ready to do it, and this doesn't feel like doing, and then become extremely appreciative of the process. So many people who go through the process want to extend the process. Oh, it's over now. I'm like, but we get to do things now. And they say, like, but that was really enjoyable. It's a process of very deep introspection. And another misconception here is a lot of people will say, well, whether or not you want to, you have a brand. Everybody has a brand. So how will you manage yours? That is not necessarily true. For some people, they do arrive at it organically. It's a very small percentage. Everyone has a reputation. Everyone is known for something. But a brand, it's something that's catchy, appealing, interesting, inspiring. And that's something that, again, very, very few people, but they do. They arrive at it, naturally and organically. For most people, it takes intentionality of figuring out, well, what actually is it? So brand is two things. It's an angle. It's your positioning. In Dalibor's case, it's optimist. I will give a couple more examples as well. And then number 2, it's the associations that our name consistently evokes in people's minds. Same with corporate branding. I say Volvo, you likely thought safe. There are a million other things, but you likely thought safe. So how you want to be perceived, what are those associations? That's part of building your brand. I'll go back to sharing my screen.
Yeah.
So personal brand is associations, and those associations, they come from, how that positioning that I mentioned to you. So optimist, how you want to be described, there's descriptors, and also things that people associate that you talk about. And we're going to break those down into a bit more detail. Do we jump into the how? How do you
think
do
we
it?
absolutely should. This is the meat and potatoes here, right?
Exactly. And, I'm hoping that by this point, so many of you go like, yes, okay, I can do it. But how do I do it? And also, if I'm an introvert, do I do it? How do I do it? Is the process different?
I think that actually is very important. I mean, I personally, I'm an extrovert, no surprise. So I intuitively, I sign up for this intuitively. But majority of people that I work with professionally who are technologists, many of them actually are not comfortable being on the stage.
Absolutely.
They're exceptional being, focused and deliberate and delivering and imagining and solving problems. So I think it's really important to emphasize and re-emphasize that this is actually that you have more clients who are introverts than who are extroverts. And that answers the question, I think, that we were asked on the QA.
Very much so. And the difference is how you choose to put yourself out there. The process of discovering your brand and what it is, it's key and crucial for everyone, even if you choose to do nothing externally with it and you only leverage it internally. I will be explaining in a moment. That piece, it is crucial because otherwise there's just this inconsistency in the image. Or if you've ever had the frustration that you're not being recognized for what you do, or you're being misunderstood by people, or not valued enough, be it employees or be it, management, this might be the key to solving that problem. You figure out how you want to be positioning yourself, how you want to be perceived, you're consistent with it internally, and that is a complete game changer. For people who are more comfortable with putting themselves out there, there are more opportunities, of course, to build visibility, because then you can be on different stages. But that there are different approaches for creating even external visibility for introverts and extroverts, but they exist for us all. And I will be giving examples.
What an interesting contemplation to actually think about, my experiences at work. Am I getting noticed? Am I getting promoted? Am I getting the opportunities? And to just do the self-reflection on, how is my brand or my reputation if I don't have a brand? Like, is there a link there? Like, there is, but to actually have a self-reflection on that is, I think, a very good exercise to have.
Well, it's huge because we have to also admit, especially for certain groups within organizations, there's a lot of bias.
Yeah.
There is a lot of bias. I remember when back when I first started my career, as I mentioned, I couldn't get a job in marketing. I ended up working in recruitment. And it happened to me many times that I would present resumes of extremely qualified candidates, and hiring managers would say, no, I want somebody from here. I want somebody with, I don't know, a local name. And I would say, but what they would say it to me also, which was extremely awkward. But I would say why. And, often there would just be misconceptions and biases. And yes, of course, we all advocate against that. I do a lot of work personally as an immigrant to advocate against that. But at the same time, when we show who we are, beyond the accomplishments on paper, beyond our CVs, just beyond when we show who we are, that is quite a game changer. You might have been expecting something very different. So there's some Marina Byezhanova that's going to be talking to us about personal branding, but then you get to see me, hear me. It is a completely different, different impression that I end up making as a result that I'm very intentional with as well. So as we look at the process of building a personal brand, there are 5 steps that we take with our clients. We developed a very clear, structured process. Yeah. It's not something, intangible, we take out of thin air. Of course, we do some external research as well, but mostly it's a process of introspection and getting to know the individual. So 5 steps. We want to figure out those 5 things before we start engaging in brand building. Number 1, well, what is going to be your angle? Dalibor is an optimist. Mine is radically candid. What's going to be yours? And I'll be giving you examples of how to figure that out. Number 2, how do you want to be perceived consistently? How do you not want to be perceived? Number 3, perceived by whom? Who's going to be doing the perceiving, the perception? Number 4, what are you going to be talking about? What topics do you want people to associate you with? And then finally, platforms. What are going to be your platforms? I don't only mean social media platforms. Yeah. Your, executive retreat, your team huddle, those are all platforms. Anywhere where you're heard and seen, that's a platform. So yes, social media is also, those are also platforms, but I don't only refer to those. There are a lot of people who don't leverage social media at all. There are even marketers who barely leverage it. LinkedIn, important. But when we talk about platforms, let's think holistically. Anywhere you're seen or heard, that become your platforms. So let's jump into positioning first, because I want to give you some specific examples. There are different exercises you can do that we do with our clients that help us figure out, well, again, Dalibor is an optimist. Who are you? As you ask yourself a question, well, who am I? What would be my positioning? There are different things that you can look at and different things that you can consider to base it on. And of course, there's different options. You'll just have to choose one, make it sound catchy and interesting, and just stick to it, because there has to be longevity. As Dalibor was giving an example, it's not something you could just boom and do. It takes time for any association to stick in people's minds and for them to for it to be sticking, for it to stay. So a couple of quick exercises I'll give you as examples. There's many that you can do, but here are 2 that work the best. Number 1, this exercise is called a lifeline. You take a giant sheet of paper. The longer the life, the wider the sheet of paper. And you map out your whole entire life. You put a line in the middle, horizontal line, and then you map out the most significant moments of your life. Mm-hmm. The highs and the lows, significant to you. It's very hard for overachievers to do this exercise because they're thinking about like what's going to sound significant through the prism, of a CV, achievements, accomplishments, or, devastating life events. No, it could be that you were me in grade 5 and a teacher lowered your grade substantially because you didn't say the right thing and your grade got cut. That was significant to me. And that's on my list. As you map all those events out, you then look for patterns. What keeps coming up? To me, it was things like that kept coming up. That made me realize that the most important thing for me is for me to be able to be me. What really sucked in my life was every time I would get silenced, that was really hard. And my wins were, I got to give a talk, and it was, back at my alma mater, and, this time people actually listened to me and heard what I had to say. So you map it out, you look for common denominators and patterns, you build a list of those patterns, and then you think of, can one of them become an angle? Number one. Number two, another great exercise is core values. What are your core values? 3. Those beliefs that are in you no matter what. And often it could be that your positioning will be around your core value. For some people, very rarely, Dalibor is a great example, it's a personality trait. I'm an optimist. That's the core of who I am. That's what I want to lead with. That becomes the angle. I have a couple of other examples that you have, Dalibor, I believe, on your desk.
So shall we go there? I can certainly share them. These are actually the examples that we have, Marina, from individuals who actually are operating in the tech domain. So let me know when you see the slide.
Works very well.
Works well? Excellent.
I see them well. Great. I will introduce you very quickly to 3 tech leaders. Those are all clients of Brand of a Leader. And I got their permission to be able to share. So introducing you to Ab Dewees, an absolutely incredible individual, owner of a multitude of businesses in the US in the tech space. Right now, he's really positioned as a fractional chief AI officer. If any of you are looking for AI expertise, I would be happy to introduce you. I do not have any monetary affiliation, but great guy. And so as we worked with him on, we did those exercises that I described to you. We do a few others as well, but those are the key ones. The life journey, what keeps coming up, what are some of the common denominators, core values. One of the things that surfaced with Ab was his ability, because he talks about, he's like a genius. He could talk about things and nobody would understand anything. But he managed to explain everything in a way that was really accessible even to somebody who's not as techie enough, but not, far away from his level. He was able to explain those things in ways that felt compelling. And so through some of our external research as well, we landed on a famous physicist, Richard Feynman, who is known for his biggest claim to fame was that he could explain even the most complex things. And he was also a genius and physicist in the way even a 5-year-old would understand. And so we decided with Ab that we would get the inspiration from his Richard, industry hero and idol. And I know you have his book as well, Dalibor.
I sure do.
And for Ab, we developed this positioning of the great simplifier. It is now everywhere, where he's introduced at an industry conference. It's Ab Dewees, the great simplifier, and then his bio, and people light up, right? Because we're also tired of those boring bios that he graduated from, and then boom, right away, it gives him a differentiator. Let's go to the next one, Mr. Matt Horn. He has a corporate career. He works in predominantly in IT security. Extremely fascinating gentleman. His dream was to be in the military. He graduated from West Point, so already that says a lot. Had this dream of defending the country and creating that safety for everyone. We also saw that similar thread when we talked about his core values. He also does some side gigs on the side. He said maybe he'd consider opening his new business. We said, why don't you? Why are you juggling both at the same time? And he said, well, I'm a family man. I want to provide for my family. That's really important to me. We took all that and we converted it into his positioning, which is securing the future. all of a sudden, do you see how it ties all those elements? It still
Yeah.
represents, it connects to what he does, but it's not just about what he does, it's really who he is. Of course, again, we presented it to him, he lit up, he's like, that is me, right? So that's also important. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, no, I don't care about that, because it doesn't represent you, right?
Yeah.
But for him, and it's every time for us when we develop, we say, this is your position, and we see the face light up and be like, oh, that's me. And we say, yes, that's the point. I would finally like to introduce you to Ms. Sonia Dore. She's the CEO of a tech company in London. She came to us with a challenge. She was stepping into an interim CEO role with no prior CEO experience, being a woman in tech, which is not a ton of female CEOs in tech. She felt when she came from CMO background, which is atypical for CEOs in the space. And so she felt she lacked credibility, and she really wanted to position herself as a thought leader, but in a way that was still authentic to her. Same exercise, everything. We get to know what she's like, personal life, professional. We look for common denominators. We noticed that two key things. All of the organizations where she worked that had something to do with automation, number one. And number two, she values kindness. She's all about kindness. She's all about humanness. And so we decided and even in her personal life, she's one of these people, like my hero, automated everything. Laundry, drop off of this, drop off that, groceries are arriving, like, I don't know, the fridge knows what needs what. She's just like, that's just at the core of who she is. So for her positioning became to automate is human. Her POV, her point of view is that automation doesn't mean that we're anti-humans and humanity. We want there to be robots. She says, no, I automate my life so that I can connect on a human level with my child and my husband more. Automation in the business allows for people to focus on building human connection and not just sit there with routine tasks. Boom, she's won a multitude of awards for being best CEO of the year. From interim, she became a permanent CEO with the organization as well. So those are three examples.
Those are fantastic.
Different angles of that.
Those are fantastic. And I love the two examples of the lifeline that you mentioned as an exercise, core value as an exercise. I have in my travels come across another framework that I found useful, which is called Ikigai, which is the search for your life's purpose, like a Japanese method to help you find your life's purpose. I think that all of them have one thing in common. Effectively, they're trying to actually peel who you are at your very core, at your essence, who you are authentically, right?
That is absolutely it. Yeah. It's all about, it's part of personal development and personal growth. You then decide what you want to do with it and at what scale and what feels comfortable to you and relevant as introvert, extrovert, or where you are at in your career or your goals with that as well. Yeah. So quickly, let's jump into the other pieces of the framework so that I can unpack it for you again with quick exercises. This is what we take our clients through, and this gives you an idea of how you can do it yourself if you decide to be audacious and do it yourself. So number two, how do you want to be perceived? How do you not want to be perceived? This is key. I'm often challenged with this one because people will say, well, Marina, if I'm being authentic on myself, then people will just perceive me as who I am, and that's great. Why do I need to make a list of, specific adjectives of how I want to be perceived? The reason for that is we're complex as human beings. We can be authentically described in 100 different ways. But then how can we be on brand and cohesive and deliver a cohesive impression? We can't. So we go through a very difficult exercise of making a choice. Here's how you do the exercise. You write out a list of all adjectives that you believe authentically describe you. You can't make something up. So if something does not describe you, but you really wish, you can't put it on the list. As Dalibor keeps saying, it has to be authentic. It's the key of the whole thing. People can smell when it's inauthentic. We know when a company has a core value, that is just not the real deal. With people, we can sense it too. So a list of adjectives that describe you, you scale it down to 3 to 5. You also think of how you don't want to be described, which is not an antonym of how you want to be described, because it's implied. I want to be perceived as outspoken, Well, certainly not as a, quiet wallflower. That's obvious. I want to be perceived as outspoken, but not argumentative or not off-putting or not, just anything that could come at the price of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That becomes your go-to quality control for everything. This is because anywhere, as I mentioned, where you're going to be heard or seen, and you want to be consistent and on brand, as we call it, that's the list you refer to. Whether it is a piece of content, whether you're speaking at a conference, whether it's a morning huddle, you refer to it. And when you stay consistent, then people start associating you with those descriptors. There's a second part to the exercise. This is a painful one. You ready for a bit of pain?
Yes.
This is where you ask people, and ideally anonymously, and ideally people on your team, colleagues, people around you, and you ask them, very simple, one question: what are the 3 adjectives you associate with me? What are the 3 words that come to mind when you see my name? When you get it and you tally it up, what you're looking for is, well, one, it's an exercise in self-awareness, right? We've done it with many clients. The self list and the external list, they don't always match. So it could mean 2 things. It could mean lack of self-awareness, or it could mean that you've just been showing the different side of you than you want to be showing, and now you can focus on showing that other side. Perception, number 2. So online, offline, you can, of course, Google yourself as well and see, because if you Google yourself and you don't come up at all, then your question is invisible one of my brand descriptors, right? Because if it is, then you're doing well. But if it's not, then you want to be searchable.
Very good.
Searchable and
Very
findable.
good.
Number 3, audience, perceived, described by whom. And typically this will be connected to your direct goals and maybe also a group of people you aim to impact and inspire. In my case, my secondary group is fellow immigrants to Canada. My primary group is Gen X leader. Number 4, what are you going to be talking about? You want to identify 2 to 3 topics maximum that you want people to associate you with. 1 or 2 on the professional level. A third one that just, again, shows who you are. In Dalibor's case, I think he does a great job with his LinkedIn content. He posts a lot about, Deloitte, work, tech, but he also posts inspirational food for thought and reflections that are connected to his optimistic side. That humanizes him. That makes him feel that he's not only, like corporate robot and just talking about business. Now, mind you, it's very important to do the business end of things too, as far as your talking points, because you're only talking, Dalibor only posted about optimism and motivation, and it becomes a bit fluffy, right? That's not what we're here for. In combination, it becomes quite magical. So industry insights and thought leadership on the connected to what you do side, and a humanizing side as well. Finally, platforms, as I already mentioned, introverts focus more on the internal platform. So first you figure out, well, what is my brand? Then you make sure to stay on brand within all of these. These come implied for you. You don't get to choose, right? Like these are part of your role as a leader. External platforms, you get to choose. So you could choose, yes, I'm going to be on LinkedIn. Listen, at the very least, if you do nothing, you need a LinkedIn profile that represents you and matches you in reality of the amazing leader that you are. When I was at the Next Gen CIO Academy and I had the privilege at Deloitte of speaking to like the top tech leaders, that I was intimidated by myself when I saw their credentials. And I Googled, almost nobody was Googleable or invisible, went on their LinkedIn. I'm like, it doesn't matter. The greatness is not apparent. So at the very least, if you do anything, just one thing externally, just create a LinkedIn profile that really stands out. Those are the different other platforms that you could choose from. Yeah. 2 last things to mention here. Brand is the first 2 steps. That's what, as Dalibor said, stays. That's the longevity. That's what you don't want to be changing. You figure out that you are the optimist, or you're the great simplifier, or you believe automation is human. You land on how you want to be perceived, not to be perceived. hold it steady. What changes is audience because that depends on your goals. Your topics can shift, the platform shift. That's how you're going to be marketing yourself and expanding your visibility. The one last thing I want to mention here, for any of you who have tried putting yourself out there, internally or externally, this will be very resonant. The number one mistake everyone makes when putting themselves out there, again, internally or externally, is they follow this exact process in the exact opposite order. I am going to go on LinkedIn. People have said I should, I shall. Step number one, platform, linkedin.com. I'm here. What should I talk about? Should I highlight a team member? Should I highlight a recent success? Should I talk about, what should I talk about?
Absolutely.
Who's going to see this? Are my employees going to see it? My colleague? Is my boss going to? What are they going to, stakeholders? What are they going to think? Are they going to think I'm looking for a job? Are they going to think I'm like all of a sudden, you know, Mr. Hotshot or Miss Hotshot showing up? What are they going to think? Perception. Then we get confused, or we keep trying and it's not working. We say, this is ridiculous. It's not for me. We quit. But the reason is we didn't figure out our angle, and we didn't figure this whole strategy and follow the framework to be able to then get the results.
Outstanding. This is this is the secret sauce. And what you said last, actually, I think elegantly brings this together. I like the advice of what not to do, and but sadly, what I agree with you, most people actually do intuitively.
Right.
This was very good. I want to have so a couple of questions. We have a few minutes. I would like to ask actually a couple of questions. The brand evolution over years and decades. So I think that we established that the core of the brand ought to be authentic and persistent throughout your life. So, you know, as you keep pointing to me as an optimist, I'm an optimist. That's been a mindset throughout, and I hope this never ends. But the content that is related to work, which is also part of my brand, will change, and it did change over the last 3 decades I've been doing what I'm doing. So I'd like to get your reflections on the importance of staying on the pulse, that the brand, how does one maybe not change but evolve brand?
Mm-hmm.
How would you advise? What would be your response to that?
Great question, and it goes. It also connects to the question that was asked in the chat. Can you have 2 different brands, one for day job on LinkedIn, one on Facebook, Instagram for size business? No, you can't. So what doesn't change? And this is for your question, Dalibor. What your brand is. So that positioning and perception that stays. Mm-hmm. That stays over the years. Of course, there are changes that can be made. There are exceptions, absolutely. Something really shifted, it can change. However, what does change is the upper part.
I see what you're saying.
Your audience changes, and it will change. Does it ever change? Of course it will change. Because as you grow through your career, your audience changes because your goals change. When you talk about changes as a result, because of that, hopefully the humanizing topic, so talking about optimism, that stays because it connects. And then platforms, of course, they change again because your career changes too. That does change, that not only when, it's not only if, it's when. How do you know it's time? Is because you want to be evaluating your goals. So once a year or every 3 years, depending on when you look at goals, you say, well, what are my goals now? Okay, so who's my audience? Like, who would help me achieve those goals, or who needs to hear my message? Does this affect my topics now? And what platforms should I be considering? That changes. Absolutely, that changes.
Yeah. So actually, you have answered my question, and you have answered it in a different way that I was assuming you will answer. So I learned something, which is excellent. So what you actually said is, your brand, the core of your brand actually stays the same persistently, and that's positioning and perception.
Yes.
Those are these eternal attributes you want to be famous for that align to your core value or is in your ikigai. And what I thought of as my evolving and changing brand, now upon reflection, is actually truly the change in topics and stakeholders, what I practice, where I lean in. That is that marketing. So this now actually fits very elegantly. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and then it's the same. So to continue with the question of, so can I have different brands for different purposes? Your messaging is different. So what you talk about on Instagram will then be different than when you talk about on LinkedIn, because you're serving different audiences, different goals, different purposes. But there needs to be that overarching feel of your brand. That's your brand perception, and the same positioning across the board. That has to stay the same. Who you're talking about, platforms, audience that you can absolutely change.
So what you're saying is that if your brand is truly authentic, then you're living yourself as you are in life and online, on LinkedIn and your Facebook. This is who you are. It's your brand. Right?
I'm so grateful you asked this question, because there's a question I'm asked very frequently, and it's, how do I curate the PR version of myself? How do you curate the professional image of myself for work? Because certainly the authentic me, you know, is in, I don't know, pajama pants, walking around the house with a beer. Not me, but I'm saying in general.
Yeah.
But I work at Deloitte, and so I can't just bring that, you know, me, and I'm authentic, and here I am. So what it boils down to is, again, be very clear and choose your perception on how you want to be perceived and not to be perceived. Of course, there's so many different sides of us that we have in different contexts and in different situations in life, right? Of course. That's why if we're not intentional with our brand descriptors, with our perception of what to build, it can definitely be right all over the place and unmanaged. So we want to select the side of us that we want to show authentically, that shifts slightly depending on context, but still stays the same. Give you a quick example. One of mine is outspoken. That is my my descriptor. One of my core values is censorship is evil for me and anybody. Even if somebody insults me, I don't block those people on LinkedIn. But so for me, being outspoken. But of course, how I'm being outspoken right now in a professional setting is not, let's say, as crass and outspoken as I would be with my friends when my girlfriend's having a drink on the weekend, right? Yeah. Still outspoken, still how I want to be perceived by everyone. Just what outspoken means will shift in different contexts. The best compliment you can get from absolutely anyone if you put yourself out there is that, let's say somebody's been watching your podcast, Dalibor, following you on LinkedIn. When they meet you in life, outside of it, in real life, and they say, oh my God, I feel like I already know you. You're exactly the same. That's what you're going for. No polished version, no PR curated version. We're more professional in more professional context, but it has to be the same person throughout. It's all about authenticity.
Marina, this has been fantastic. Thank you very much for your time and for your wisdom. We're getting a lot of great session. Thank you. Amazing session. Thank you.
Please connect with me on LinkedIn.
I was going to suggest, exactly. This is all upon us listening to internalize and act upon, with resisting the ask for you all to go at the very top of that pyramid and select the platform first, resisting the temptation to say that I do agree that all of us actually need to be present. I believe that we all have a reputation that is impacting daily our output and our navigation of both life and business, and that unless we proactively think and take a hold of navigating, crafting and navigating a true authentic brand, we're actually relinquishing control of our career to a certain degree, aren't we? Right?
Very much so. And especially, you know, when I'm in a room of incredibly inspiring people, I just want to say, you know, so many people will say, well, what do I have to say of value? Who wants to hear from me? If not you, then who?
Exactly. What a great way to wrap it up, Marina. I would like to thank you so much for your time. Obviously, all of the audience members, if you'd like to connect with Marina, obviously you can do that either through me or directly with Marina on LinkedIn. This actually was the last show of this calendar year. So today is December 13th, 2023. I want to take a moment to wish you all a very, very happy holiday season. Happy New 2024. We are preparing exciting programming for 2024. I'm going to be announcing it soon. And we will start right in January. So with that, Marina, thank you so very much. And to our audience members, thank you and have a phenomenal remainder of Wednesday. Marina.
Thank you so much and happy holidays to everyone.
Absolutely. All the best. Bye-bye.